I thought it was pronounced differently. He's a Canuck like me, right? Yeah? He's Canadian? Yeah, I think he had a medical issue a few weeks back, and we didn't get all the details, so we've kind of left some messages, and Roy's following up on some stuff. So keep him in prayer. He built the sound booth for us, and he's a really, really good guy. And I think he had, it was work-related. He was at work, and some stuff happened. So we'll find out more details about that as time goes. But there's other folks that are sick. As far as I know, Rosie is doing better. She had a little fall skiing, I think. I don't have exactly all the details. It's not as bad as we thought, as far as I know. So that's another good thing. Thank you, Prayer Warriors, for all the stuff you do. And then Sunday, you guys know, is the Lord's Supper. It's 2017. Wow, right? 2017. Yeah, we're still here. We're still here. We're still moving forward. So we're going to do what we normally do. So every head is bowed, every eye is closed. Let's take the time to wash away the garbage we collect in the world. Father, we ask that you bless this message we're about to receive. Help us be able to metabolize it and apply it, Father, to our lives as we're going forward into this new year. And perhaps there's somebody in our periphery we haven't spoke to about the Lord Jesus Christ. And maybe it's that time, Father, to bring the message to them. And ask these things, Father, for your blessings and to touch all those folks I just mentioned, Father, and heal those folks and guide them through your Son's precious name, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. We're going to talk about some spiritual growth, and how that comes is through testing. And if you haven't heard it from this pulpit before, I'll let you know something. When you win the lottery, you don't learn a lot. Getting a lot of money and getting a lot of gifts and getting a lot of things given to you, you don't necessarily learn a lot. How we learn and how we grow many times have to do with the tests that we get through in life. And Cliff did a wonderful job. I think he went back to Colorado, unfortunately. Great guy, great teacher, right? Good man. And he took some of Pastor's notes and he kind of went into his own life story stuff with it, which is phenomenal, and that's a nice gift to have. If you're going to get behind the pulpit, you got to be able to connect with people. And it can't always be deep theological terms all the time. So he did a wonderful job, and I got a lot from it. It was very relaxing. I hope everybody enjoyed it. So tonight we're going to get into a little bit more of that, because like he was saying, everything is a test. And we've known from Pastor's teaching and our own life experiences, there's really three big tests in life that continually come our way, right? People testing, right? Thought testing, right? And system testing. Those three are the big ones. There's a lot of other little tests that we have, but those three, people, thought testing, and system testing, there's something we're constantly kind of regurgitated through and pushed through time and again in different areas. And the Word of God shows it, and I think Cliff touched on it pretty well last night. If we don't pass it the first time around, God's real patient. Time doesn't mean anything to him, right? 1,000 years is a day, and a day is 1,000 years. You're going to go through it again. So just go through it, apply the doctrine, and pass the test. So we're going to take a look at Jacob's favorite son, Joseph, tonight. We've been in the Old Testament for a little while, and I know, we're church-age believers, and the New Testament is where we get our studies on mystery doctrine and how we move forward. But you can't beat those stories in the Old Testament for looking at how people either failed or succeeded or applied something or didn't apply something. It's really, really key. And so we're going to approach it from a different angle as church-age believers, and how we develop our spiritual growth and use Bible doctrine to resolve difficult issues in our life. And we've studied Joseph and his brothers before, but I want to put a focus on how we can bring it to use in our daily lives. And Cliff used a term last night that I use occasionally, is putting something in your toolbox or taking a tool out. Because it's great to listen to some, but if you don't know how to apply it and it doesn't hit you where the rubber meets the road, you're going to walk out of here and think, that was great, and I can pronounce a new Greek word, and that's as far as it goes. And you don't want that. You want to be able to apply. I'm going to have you guys turn to Genesis chapter 37. And just because we're going into the Old Testament and looking at some of the Old Testament heroes lately with Pastor or myself, it doesn't mean that we're not still studying church-age doctrines. And 1 Corinthians 10:11 says it best. Now what? These things happened to them as a what? An example. And they were written for our instructions, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. So we're going to take a look at these guys. We are church-age believers, but we can never forget nor neglect the importance of Old Testament heroes, the lessons found in their lives, the failures, the successes recorded for our benefit. Genesis 37:1. We're going to read right through it, and then we're going to go back and kind of take a look at some really key principles concerning things like jealousy, bitterness, anger, all the stuff we've been going through. We did a series recently on fear and panic, and then we kind of got into the bitterness and the anger and the blame game. And I want to take a look at it from some different angles here. Genesis 37:1. Now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zelphah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. In Genesis 37:3, now Israel, Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his sons because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a varicolored tunic, that long coat we all know about, technicolored coat. In verse 4, his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. In Genesis 37:5, then Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, please listen to this dream which I have had. In verse 7, for behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bound down to my sheaf. In verse 8, then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us? Or are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and his words. In verse 9, now he had still another dream, and he related it to his brothers and said, lo, I have had another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. Genesis 37:10, he related it to his father and to his brothers, and his fathers rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground? In verse 11, his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Then his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem. Genesis 37:13, Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them. And he said to him, I will go. Then he said to him, go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. In verse 15, a man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and a man asked him, what are you looking for? And in verse 16, he said, I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are pasturing the flock. Then the man said, they have moved from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. When they saw him from a distance and before he came close, they plotted against him to put him to death. And in Genesis 37:19, they said to one another, here comes the dreamer. Now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into the pits. And we will say, a wild beast devoured him. Then let us see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben, in verse 21, heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, let us not take his life. Reuben further said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness, but do not lay hands on him. Don't kill him, that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father. So at least you had one brother a little bit looking out for him. In verse 23, so it came about when Joseph reached his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the varicolored tunic that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. Now the pit was empty without any water in it. And we just recently got into a water series. Then they sat down to eat a meal, and as they raised their eyes and looked, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh, and on their way to bring them down to Egypt. In verse 26, Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. In verse 28, then some Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled him up and lifted Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. In verse 29, now Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, so he tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is not there. As for me, where am I to go? Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. So they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat. They're plotting and planning all along. They dipped the tunic in the blood, and they sent the very cold tunic and brought it to their father and said, "We found this. Please examine it and see whether it is your son's tunic or not." In verse 33, he examined it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." So Jacob did what? He tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son many days. We know that is a way of mourning in the old ancient world. Then all his sons, in verse 35, and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "Surely I will go down to Sheol in the morning for my son." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. Now, we're going to start off with a reality check concerning Joseph. I wanted you to get all the way through it because there's a lot of plotting and planning. It happens kind of quick. But there's a lot of plotting and planning that goes on. Joseph often gets praise, and he gets put on a pedestal by certain Bible scholars. Joseph was a great believer, probably way beyond anything I'll ever think about being. But I want to simply balance it out a little bit. Joseph was most certainly a young man of integrity and courage, but he was also a young man of arrogance and accustomed to special treatment. I want you to look at Genesis 37:2. Go back to the beginning of that. These are the records of the generation of Jacob. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zelphah, his father's wives. And what did Joseph do? What do we see his attitude? Brought back a bad report about them to their father. Joseph seemed to have a problem with putting himself above others. He's the youngest in the family. He seemed to have a problem, and we're not saying Joseph was a bad guy, was a horrible believer or anything like that, but often when you start to study commentaries and you get deeper into studying different teachers and different principles, a lot of folks take Joseph and they raise him up very high, and he should be respected and raised high. Like I said, he's a better believer than I'll probably ever be. He went through a lot more than I'll ever go through. But we don't want to neglect the fact that Joseph had an old sin nature as well. Always keep that in mind. Joseph seemed to have a problem with putting himself above his brothers a little bit. Some people have a need to make others look bad or even just seem like they don't measure up to a standard that they're at. And this basically stems from arrogance. It's from the old sin nature. So yes, he has an old sin nature. And all of those heroes that we see and all the folks that we see, even Mary, I think Cliff got into it and Pastor got into it. You know, there's a certain denomination that likes to take Mary and raise her really high. Mary was a sinner. If you think she was so pure that she was sinless perfection, you would have to say, even if she had Jesus at the age of 15 or 16 years old, which is quite possible when she had him, all those years leading up to that point, she was sinless perfection. She never lied. She never cheated. She never got mad. She never had an evil thought. She never looked at another little Hebrew boy running by and saying, "No, you know, he's a handsome guy. I'm attracted to." Think about that. Think about that. So all these heroes, these folks, they're not much different than we are. Are some of them gone to greater lengths? Have they stepped up to a level of maturity like a Job or a Joseph did, and they've raised themselves up to a level that we should admire? Absolutely. But be careful about putting somebody on a pedestal. So everybody has that old sin nature. Now, this was recorded for the purpose, just like the next couple verses. In other words, it's shown for a reason why Joseph said and did certain things. Look at verse 3. Now Israel, what? Loved Joseph more than all his sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made him the technicolor tunic, the jacket. Very special. You got all these sons, and you're only going to make one this special jacket. Neither one of these verses lead anywhere else. In other words, there's not a lot of doctrinal conclusions, so why are they recorded, in other words? I mean, we can grab some doctrines and take them out of there. There's some pieces to do with the jacket and whatnot. But what I think God is also showing us is that Joseph had a little struggle with arrogance. There's this thing going on where old sin natures you're going to start seeing are bouncing off each other and hitting off each other. And that's what you're going to get a view of. And God has a subtle way of letting us church-age believers see the folly, the flaws of the men and women in his plans without destroying their character completely. He never does. Even the brothers get redeemed somewhere down the line, you know, and they did some pretty evil stuff. So God has a subtle way of taking his men and women when they fail and showing them to us and saying, this is the wrong way to do something. This is the wrong way. Learn from this and move forward. but without totally destroying that person's character and integrity. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, even the Apostle Paul, we know just enough about that and realize they had flaws. They had character flaws. They had old sin natures, and how much they were really like us. And they still were able to succeed. 28 years into his ministry, Paul screaming and crying about his old sin nature within him and saying, you know what, it's not the sin in me. It's the sin in me. It's the old sin nature that's causing me to do these things. So don't think that you can't rise above the old sin nature, but it's always going to be there. It's always going to be battling against you. So it's one of those battles we got to kind of get used to. And even the spiritual giants like Joseph, we see them struggling with something like that. Joseph was someone who looks like he struggled with a little bit of arrogance or maybe a sense of being spoiled or entitled. Someone who knew he was special. He was slightly prideful in that area. He may even been what we call today entitled. And that's dangerous ground to walk on when you start to feel entitled. Joseph was great because he was faithful to God. He was respectful toward his father Jacob. But Joseph, just like us, had arrogance in his soul. All of us have it. I'm standing here tonight, I have it. We all have our issues. Everybody. We all have our old sin nature that spins off in different directions. Look at verse 4, Genesis 37:4. I think I got to print these notes a little bit bigger next time, huh? Anyhow, Genesis 37:4. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they what? Hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. Senah, it's the Hebrew verb. It has a strong meaning to detest, to turn against as a foe. So when you're talking about brothers and you see this term, you know, sometimes brothers fight. I grew up with a couple of brothers that it was like insane. You'd go over there, they'd be fist fighting in the backyard. There was 5 of them. And the next day they would stand up for each other in school and fight everybody else. The Damaris brothers, they were just crazy. They happened to be my friends. I was lucky because a couple of them were about yay big. But this is different. This is a very strong, when you look at this Hebrew verb, it has intense emotions in it. It really is something that's almost borderlines on that kind of criminal. You look at it as somebody like a foe, and you start getting that criminal intent of, man, I want to hurt that person. And they're brothers. They're brothers. So when we read this about Joseph's brothers, we're witnessing a true sense of what we call hatred beyond the normal brothers fighting. They considered Joseph an enemy. You're living in a house and it's your enemy. You're living under the same roof. You know, you're sharing the food. You're breaking bread together and praying together and learning doctrine, hopefully, together. And you're hating each other? You're hating each other? So how much can God work in your life when you think about that? Joseph had difficult and troubled relations with his peers and brothers, but the root of the problem came from his father, Jacob, Israel. I'm not saying Joseph wasn't to blame. He absolutely was, but he's a young man at this time. And you know what? When kids grow up, they get affected by things. We all did. I have my issues. Everybody in this room has issues because dad and mom, or lack of dad and mom, or different things that happen. And sometimes we carry it into our adult lives. We get to a certain point where, you know what, we turn it over to God and we take responsibility for it. It's nobody's fault but our own. But I'm looking at Jacob here. Like I said, we're going to take a look at all these guys in different angles. And everybody failed. Because it's very interesting how when you see a husband and a wife divorce, or a brother and a sister fight, or friends fight, there's always one side that's 100% right. That's wrong. Nobody. Even, believe it or not, even the cheating husband may have been pushed in that direction. He's wrong for doing that. But I'm sure if you rewind the tape 3 years, 5 years, or whatever, and we see what led up to the breakup of those two people and that act that he shouldn't have done, there's probably 90-10. Maybe it's 90% his fault, 10% the woman's fault. We don't know. But nobody's ever 100% wrong in all of these things. So Joseph had a difficult and troubled relationship with peers and brothers. You see it. You see it. The root of the problem, though, if we start looking at his father had a lot to do with it. When a parent shows favoritism toward one child over another, it affects the psyche of one of the ones who are being put on a lower scale. It affects all of them. Really, it affects their psyche. The ones on a lower scale, it really chops away at them. It chops away at their confidence. It also pushes that favored child up on a life journey, basically, of feeling entitled or feeling a little bit special. They may not say it, but they kind of feel like I might be able to get away with this. We see this a lot of times nowadays in the athletic realm. You see a lot of football players that do crazy stuff, and you're thinking, why would they do that? Because since they were 14 or 15 years old, they've been really good at something, and everybody along the way has said, wow, you're phenomenal at it. I got to experience a piece of that. My son was a pretty good jock, everything he did. So I remember looking at some of his, I was a single parent for a while, I remember looking at some of his homework paper and thinking, wow, that's beautiful handwriting. That can't be yours, Colton. And I find out it was a girl doing his homework for him, and the coach was fine with it, because if my son didn't keep a C+ or a B, he wasn't going to be state champion wrestler anymore, and he wasn't going to be varsity football player anymore. I also found out he got excused from classes by the coach all the time. So these are things you find out. So that starts to be like, that's okay. I'm special. No, you're not. No, you're not. That's an entitlement. It's a very scary thing. Everyone gets a trophy. Isn't that the age we live in right now? Everyone gets a trophy. Do you know how harmful that is? Because now you got a grown man that's 22, 23 years old, and he's got the mentality of a 14-year-old spoiled child. And that's a problem. Especially going to be a problem for the ladies he meets in his life. But it's a problem. The same thing with the women. Entitlement. Entitlement. Those who continually get supported, preferred treatment, have less accountability than others, easily develop this attitude of entitlement. We see it today. There's a whole political genre thing going on I don't want to get into, but I know you guys know what I'm talking about. There's a term I heard many years ago called king baby. It's interesting because it's when somebody really thinks of others and almost all their thoughts, all their actions centers around what they want or how they got hurt or how this or how that, but they're very much into self. And entitlement will do that. So Joseph might have had a piece of this kind of entitlement attitude. Remember, Jacob had several wives, many children, so he wasn't exactly setting a good example with this situation with Joseph. But who do we need to go to? God the Father gives us the best example of spreading what we call fatherly love. Romans 2:11, for there is what? No partiality with God. Not in God's world. In man's world there is. So as parents, you need to be really careful with that. I can't lecture parents because I had one son, I was married and divorced young, had one son. I have two stepdaughters that have basically grown up. So my experience was limited to one son. And I went through my little trials with him, but it wasn't that bad. Some folks have 4 or 5 children. You have to be very careful with that showing favoritism. It does affect all the other children. Excuse me. Showing partiality to a young child over their brothers and sisters can lead to confidence issues within this children, and later on, that child's going to become an adult, and those confidence issues are going to spill over. Acts 10:34. I definitely got to make these bigger, huh? Peter stated, I most certainly understand now that God is not one to show partiality. The end result of favoritism can lead to animosity between siblings. That's what you're kind of seeing in this story. We see this very problem arise within the brothers in Genesis 37. We also see a young Joseph who's begun to see himself just a little bit above his brothers. I'm not saying that Joseph is pounding his chest and saying, look at me, but he's kind of got this, you get this feel about the story like, let me tell you something that I had a dream about while he's flowing in his Technicolor gown that Dad made for him. And all the other brothers are sitting there looking at what the older brothers will say, oh, really? They can't wait to get him behind the shed, That sense of entitlement was taking root in Joseph's life. We start to see it. James 2:1, my brethren, do not hold your faith in glorious Lord Jesus Christ with an attitude of what? Personal favoritism. You know what? We're all the apple of God's eye. All of us. God loves a loser believer as much as he loves you if you're a winner believer. The difference is the winner can advance in the pre-designed plan of God. They can receive blessing in time, and obviously later in eternity receive the crowns and blessings. That's the difference. But God really loves the loser believer and loves the winner believer. He loves unbelievers. He just can't have an intimate, close relationship because they've put a wall up by not believing in Jesus Christ. So that personal love, God can't reach out and have that personal love. And they actually become an enemy of God. But in his heart somewhere, by studying God, that he loves them. And it's probably very sad. He wants all to be saved, all to come to the knowledge. But Joseph was being prepared to be used by God. He needed some humility to fully understand his situation. If you're going to be given a lot and things are going to come your way, you better start getting some humility. And sometimes you got to get hit over the head and you learn it. And sometimes you stumble through it. But Joseph needed to find some humility. And as we go forward, we can see the result of Jacob's lack of discipline, his weak example as a father, has led to a group of troubled young men. Look at verse 5. Genesis 37:5. And Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. How can you hate even more than having an enemy and wanting to, like, really borderline strangle him on the spot? They're going to another level now. Joseph was given a gift from God, and he was being called out by God for a great task. God was knocking on his heart, pushing him in a direction. So Joseph wasn't being wrong about his dreams, his interpretations, where he was going, but he started to handle it in a way that was coming across arrogant and prideful. He needed to get that humility. He needed to remain humble. Genesis 37:5 shows very little restraint from Joseph. And restraint is something you have to learn over time if you're going to be put in a position like he was going to be put in. Let's face it, he got to a position in life, even through all his trials and tribulations, he only had one person above him. Basically, he was kind of like in a vice president's position. You know what I mean? He had the president above him, if we want to look at it in American terms. So he was given a gift, and he was being called out, but he had to learn that humility, and that's always tough for all of us. Joseph was an intelligent young man. He knew what he was saying. He knew what he was doing. In other words, this wasn't just foolishness that he threw out there once in a while. He's a smart kid. Joseph can't wait to tell his brothers in verse 6, right? Yet we already know he doesn't have a good relationship with them. This can only do one thing. You know when he brings that to the table, when he brings that conversation to the table, they already hate you. They're already attacking you on different levels. You're already having arguments with them. You're already having problems with them. And you're going to keep throwing these dreams in their face. It might have been kind of smart, when you think about it, for Joseph to get away with daddy. You know, favorite boy, get away with daddy and maybe have a conversation with dad. I'm having these dreams. I'm being led in this direction. You know, God's really going to bless me out. What should I do? You don't need to run out into the field or run out in front of everybody, in front of all your brothers and say, yeah, basically, you're going to be all bowing down to me. How does that make you feel? Think about it. When you look at this story, like I said, Joseph, a lot of times, I looked at a lot of commentary about a month ago when I started putting this together. Maybe 3 weeks ago, I started putting it together little pieces at a time because it had a lot to do with different mental attitude sins and stuff like that, the Exodus generation. And I know where pastor's going with most of his messages. Contrary to popular belief, the pastor sometimes is 2 or 3 weeks ahead on a message. He'll get up and teach something that he wrote 2 weeks ago, you know. So I kind of privy to some of that, and I knew what direction he was going in. So you start looking at Joseph, and you start seeing this subtle arrogance. I'm not saying it was a horrible sin, but sin is sin. We kind of dress things up and say, well, this one wasn't as bad. It's just like when you look at the prostitute, the addict on the street, and you're driving by, and you got a problem with your temper, or you got a problem with judging. Don't look at them, because sin is sin. Sin is sin. So don't start putting on different levels. And actually, arrogance, when you start listing sins, you look in the Bible. We know arrogance, that haughty eyes, is one of the top ones. Not that God has a list 1 through 10. But that's one of the first ones listed when you think about it. So Joseph was an intelligent guy. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was saying. So we can't kind of excuse him. It's a good chance Joseph was right around the age of 17, which is almost, we consider a man in this day and age. Back then, you were a man. Believe me, back then at 14 or 15, it's unbelievable what we have in our day and age today. We have young folks that are 13 or 14 years old that are just being coddled, and they can't handle this, they can't do that. You know what, 13 or 14 years old, David was out fighting grizzly bears and herding sheep across the countryside by himself. And mommy wasn't there and worried about him, and he was almost a man at that point. He was almost a man. So we're not doing anybody favors, especially the men in our society, when they're coddled too much and there's an entitlement, because you got yourself a man-child at 25 or 30 years old. And that's a pretty scary thing for some ladies. I think I could probably hear some amens going mentally somewhere. Let's go to Genesis 37:7. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect, and behold, your sheaves gathered around. And this is a true dream he had. He's not just saying it and making it up as he go, but did he need to say this? I don't know. Bow down to my sheaf. And then verse 8, then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us? Or are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and his words. And Joseph's continuing to pound it home. What is coming into view here is what we have today in our society. You know how we have the haves and have-nots? And it's sad. I don't like it. But there's a purposeful focus on what some have and others lack. Eat the rich mentality. You ever heard that term? eat the rich mentality. See, what's crazy is when you see people that get upset, and you hear the term, and I've heard it within my own circle of family or friends, not in this church, obviously, some folks on the outside, but that nobody should have that much money. They need to give some of that money away. Who are you to say who needs that? You know how petty that sounds? Do you know how jealous that sounds? When you say they shouldn't have this, they shouldn't have. Who are you? Well, I think they cheated to get it. Their daddy gave it to them. So what? God decided to bless them right now. They might not have any other blessings in eternity. So what? Who are you? I hope, you know what? Donald Trump isn't my favorite person. And I don't, the whole presidential thing, whatever. It was lesser of two evils, whatever you want to call it. I hope he makes another $100 million because guess what? He's got 25 or 28,000 people working underneath him. They're pretty happy he's a millionaire, right? I'm pretty happy that the church is able to make a few dollars and maybe I can get a paycheck. I'll work hard and I'll do the right thing. That's life. That's capitalism. That's free market. That's how it works. I hope he makes $300 million the day he steps out of the White House and hires another 50,000 people in America and puts them all to work. Because that's how it works. The haves and have-nots, let me tell you something. There's a purposeful focus going on that's trying to divide. And truth be told, equality does not exist now or in eternity. It doesn't. The only equality we have is what? Equal what? Privilege, equal opportunity. Everybody's here taking notes, learning tonight. You all have a chance. When you walk out the door, everybody's going to do something different with it, just like the parable with the slave and the master gave him coins. Just like they walk out. Someone's going to go hide it and hold on to it. Others are going to double it and triple it. It's up to you what you want to do with it. But equality is not guaranteed anywhere. I don't know where that comes from. I really don't. I heard years ago somebody said, and I believe this person is probably as close to being an atheist as you can be, but claims not to be, somebody I know, and she mentioned to me that, yeah, Jesus was a socialist. I was like, what? Where did you get that from? Where did you get that from? Jesus was a socialist. Equal opportunity to use what God offers us is what we get. Equal opportunity to what God offers us. If God blesses someone with a wealthy family, perhaps they have talent, perhaps they don't. They have some kind of business savvy, perhaps they don't. I don't know. Maybe they got lucky. That's between God and that person. It's none of your business. So get over it. The less fortunate are never told to rebel against those who have more, nor is there a standard in God's word for forcing equality on society. There's not a standard in the Bible for that. You can't find it. Now, you could take some scriptures and do what Satan's done and do what denominations do and twist some things around and take one scripture and let it stand out here on its own and twist it around and say, well, that kind of says this. No, it don't. No, it doesn't. Excuse my English. I'm a scholar. Give me some more scriptures. Give me some historical background. Give me some isagogics. Let me see. Follow up. Give me a little bit more than just taking a scripture and floating it out here and twisting it around. The less fortunate are never told that to do that in the Bible, rebel. Jesus Christ didn't come and attack the Roman army. You never see him do that. There's no place in the Bible that demands those with more talent, more wealth, or more of anything must equally take the social scales in any community and they have to tilt them in another direction. Even when looking at different forms of biblical tithing, you can look at this. Because you have to look at all these different things when you study something like this. Exodus 30:15, the rich shall not pay more than the poor, shall not pay less than half a shekel. When you give the contribution to the Lord, make the atonement for yourselves. I can show you passages that God commands believers to be gracious. He commands them to be gracious and generous to the less fortunate, to give freely, but never a strict demand to level the playing field. Leviticus 19:15, you shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor defer to the great, but you are to judge your neighbor fairly. Matthew 26:11, you've got these secular liberal churches that really hate this one. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. Jesus Christ is basically saying, this is how it is right now. Things are going to get better, but right now, this is how it's going to be. Focusing on what others have or the bad luck you may be having is a sure sign of immaturity. Actually, it reeks of bitterness and that spirit that I was just talking about earlier, that petty, bitter spirit. Like, why do they have that? Why does this one have this? Why does that one have this? Don't get caught up in that. If you start thinking along those lines, rebound quick and get away from it. Deuteronomy 15:11. For the poor will never cease to be in the land, therefore I command you, we're going to look at this, saying, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, to your needy, and the poor in your land. Deuteronomy 15 is telling us God expects the believer to be what? Generous? Right? But he also note the poor will never cease to be in the land. Also notice freely open your hand, meaning give what you can, and that's not always about money. Doesn't necessarily say money there. I don't know. Somebody hungry? Make them a meal. They're cold? You got an extra jacket? Give it to them. It's how you, but I don't see social justice in there, so be very careful when this coming from the pulpit telling you have to do this or have to do that politically. Be very careful with that. Joseph's arrogance in this situation is about to be trumped by his brother's bitterness, jealousy, and their natures. Their old sin natures are starting, like I said, they're all hitting. They hate that their little brother is not only favored by daddy, but he is gifted by God, and some people hate that. Some people will never accept certain gifts that other people have, and that's just life. They're not happy when you get promoted. They're not happy if you don't get promoted. You can't win, as Pastor said, and you get to a certain point, and he's absolutely right. Some of it comes with age, and some of it comes with just growing up spiritually and realizing, I don't really care what anybody thinks. I don't really care. I got to answer to one person, and that's it. Then I got to go home and answer to my wife. But I mean, other than that, you know. Luckily, I don't have it like that. As long as I don't make a mess. We got to be careful. You got to be careful with the messes with my wife. I love her. She's probably watching right now, so I'll hear when I go home. You got to be careful. She's one of them people, boy, you put that cup down, and I do it because I'm half Irish, so I like to aggravate. So she takes the little circular things that I never use. What are they called? Coasters. She loves those. Slides it under. As soon as she leaves the room, I take the coaster, remove it, and put it down. She comes in the room. She can't focus on anything else but that wet ring on the table. Make her crazy, you know. But that's, you know, they're just having fun. But honestly, folks, Joseph's arrogance in this situation is going to get trumped by his brothers, and going to get trumped in a bad way, because what basically happens when we stay in something, and I'll give Joseph credit for this, because you see somebody a lot like Job, who fumbled a little bit during his testing here and there, but he kept like kind of dusting himself off. David was like that too. And that's really why God says, you know, he's a man after my own heart. It wasn't because he didn't fail. It was that how he dusted himself off so quick and kept going forward. And his pastor always says, fall forward, because you're moving forward. So Joseph has that kind of quality. David has that quality. Job has that quality. When I was thinking about different believers, Paul has that kind of quality about him. Peter actually has that kind of quality. When you think about Peter, Pastor and I had a conversation maybe about a week ago about Peter denying the Lord. And I think about that, and I think the depiction you see and the description you get even from studying the original language is Peter was right there and the Lord was within earshot. So it wasn't like he did it behind a mile away and the Lord didn't hear it or whatever. Like it was right in that crowd, right in that, and Jesus could hear it anyway, no matter what, obviously, deity. But Peter had to go and live with that, denying. And you know how somebody tells you don't do something, like your parents, and then right when you're in the middle of doing it, it rings in your head, I can't believe I'm doing this. You say it to yourself. Or have you ever done something or said something and realized that sounded just like my dad or my mom? Peter must have had that. You know how magnified that must have been in Peter's head? I don't know the man. I don't know the man. You know, at the last time he said it, he was like angry, because Peter had a short fuse anyway. He was a little scrappy. I like Peter. You know, and he was, I don't know the man. Leave me alone was basically what he's saying. And weren't you with him? No, I didn't know him. Denied him. And what happens right after? Right? I mean, Pastor and I were talking about that, how that must have sat in his head at that moment, how crushing There's been times when I've done something wrong or something happened and I realize it. I'm not a person that holds on to anything a long time, especially now over the years with doctrine. I'm within a day or two, once I pray about something, think something over and do what Cliff said, which was excellent advice, kind of take the data, the information, and put it in different buckets for a minute and step back. If you didn't hear that Wednesday night, learn to do that. And then I can kind of gather my thoughts and be like, it's not a big deal, and just calm myself and be like, whatever. And just either roll forward and be just loving and caring and keep moving no matter what. Or I'll go and apologize if I feel I need to owe somebody an apology. I mean, that's just how it is. So I look at somebody like Joseph and I see that prideful, that arrogance there, but I also see somebody who didn't live in it for a long period of time. And even when he got trapped in jail, he kind of fumbled a little bit, but he kind of got back on track. So that's really the important part, but you don't see that. I got about maybe 15 minutes left. We're going to get into his brothers a little bit. You don't see that with his brothers. You get the feeling from studying about his brothers, because they don't give you a lot. There's gaps of time, because the story focuses on Joseph. But they lived with the fact for a long time that their brother's gone. When they went to that pit, it's like, uh-oh. They had that realization like Peter, that crushing realization. What did I do? But you don't see any of them confess and come to a point. You don't see it come to a point where they finally say, hey, let's go tell Dad we screwed up. Let's go look for our brother. Let's go. Looks like they lived in their sin for a long time, is what it looks like. Because by the time they hook up back with Joseph years later, there's a lot of guilt going on with those guys. We don't have time to study. You guys know, you're well-schooled. You know when they face Joseph again, they don't even recognize who he is. Because now he's, totally different looking. So they don't realize he looks like an Egyptian or whatever. They don't realize what who he is. But you see the guilt in them, so they've carried it for all those years. But Joseph, I get a vibe like Joseph was a lot like Job, a lot like David. Yeah, he fell. Yeah, he failed. But they were done. You know how we talk about having short accounts with God? That's what it's about. I thought about the rebound that we talk about here, and some folks don't believe in. I don't know why. It's all over the Bible. But little accounts. So in other words, they screw up. Something happens. They're, Father, forgive me. Let me dust myself. Let me move off. Repent. Metanoia. Change my mind. Move forward. Turn from that and keep going. Don't live in it. They kept short accounts. David is a man after God's own heart, I believe, my personal opinion, because he kept short accounts with God. Not because he failed miserably. And the times that he had longer periods of failure and lived with it, you hear him crying out. He is just gnashing his teeth and crying out and miserable, living in his old sin nature. So keep short accounts. If you didn't get nothing else tonight, so pick up that and run with it. Keep short accounts. But we keep in mind during this, we are continually tested in many areas within our spiritual walk. Some testing is designed to show us our own weaknesses. Other tests are there to put muscle on our faith. Either way, it should lead us to spiritual maturity. It should. And notice I underline should, because this is where volition comes into play, and that's what I'm talking about. The men like Joseph or Job or David, their volition was, I'm either going to sit here and be miserable and live in my old sin nature, poor me, oh my. What does Pastor always say? Lippy the lion and Hardy har har. I'm like, that's 1935, Pastor. Are you kidding me? But you either live in it like that, or you keep that short account and dust yourself off, and you go forward, forgetting what lies behind, pressing forward to what's ahead. So notice I underline should, because it doesn't always happen. Volition comes into play, and that's where motivation, doctrinal intake, they all come into the spotlight. And where is our focus when we're tested in areas of mistreatment, or even when our own weaknesses, our own arrogance come out and others have to see it? Doesn't that suck? All right? How many times we've all fallen on our face? We've all done it. I've done it. I'll probably do it tomorrow, or I might do it next week. I'll make a fool of myself in front of somebody, my short fuse, something else, and I'll have to rebound, be like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that or did that. Oh well. It's so much easier now that I've learned things like position and condition, really the depth of rebound, how to really walk in the Spirit, all these different things. So now I can be like, oh, well, so-and-so either is going to forgive me or they're not. I don't care, because God forgives me and I'm going to move forward, and it is what it is. So you keep moving forward. But there are those times we fall right in front of others and really kind of show your butt, they say. You know, you just showed your butt. Joseph's kind of doing that with his brothers, this arrogant attitude. Keep coming back with the dreams and keep telling them and keep telling them. From time to time, we all look foolish in front of others. We all make mistakes, and we do it out in the open, and that's life. And God is actually kind of waking you up, and those things happen. God's just basically telling you, hey, dummy, change that. Change that attitude, change that belief, change that whatever you're doing, shake it off and move forward. But some people stay. Again, we get into motivation, the volition. Focusing on what some lack or others have is a futile effort in life. It's a social and a political tool to ignite frustration and move hidden agendas forward. When you are making people focus on what they don't have, or what others have, or what you're missing out on, it's really a tool. Politicians use it, people use it, the social aspect, there's groups that use this different type of stuff. It actually ignites frustration, and you can move people in different directions like sheep. Like sheep. You got to be very careful. We see hidden agendas become revealed over time when people do this kind of stuff. So be very careful about getting caught up in that. Because think about what Satan did in the garden. What did he do in the garden? He basically said, you can't have this stuff? Wow, you're missing out. You're lacking something over. That's kind of what he said, more or less. Wow, that God is, sure he loves you? There's an underlying stuff to what Satan said to the woman that made her think like, yeah, you're right. I'm kind of missing out on something. I'm lacking in an area. So be careful with that. Focusing on what others lack or what you don't have, it's a dangerous trap. Look at Genesis 37:9. Now he had still another dream. I'm going to come back again because he hasn't aggravated him enough. And related it to his brothers and said, lo, I have had still another dream. You guys want to hear it? Behold, whether you do or not, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. His brothers must have liked that one too, I think. Joseph is having genuine dreams. He's having visions from God, but it's how he's handling that authority that was given to him. It's how he's handling that gift he had right now, and the fact that he had already made enemies out of his brothers. He's well aware. At 17, Joseph was much more like somebody at 25 or 30 today. He's well aware his brothers are very unhappy with him. His own brothers, the dreams that are showing them, he's not being a humble young man in this situation. The fact that he had already made enemies out of his own brothers, even before these dreams, it shows us he's not exactly the most humble guy in the group. Genesis 37:10. He related it to his father, to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow down ourselves on the ground before you? Notice, this is upsetting everyone in the family. And daddy, that's, his daddy's boy, and daddy's getting upset. There's arrogance, entitlement bubbling up in Joseph. And then we start to see some other things because old sin natures are doing this. They're knocking. So arrogance, entitlement are bubbling up. Guess what bubbles up on the other side? Jealousy, bitterness, anger. That's coming out from the rest of the family. Now jump down a few verses. We're going to see a couple of things here. I got you for maybe 10 more minutes, a little less, and we'll get through it. Genesis 37:16, he said, I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are pasturing the flock, because he was sent out to look for his brothers. In verse 17, and the man said, they have moved from here to there, and I've heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. When they saw him from a distance, before he came close, they did what? Plotted against him to put him to death. Genesis 37:18 is what is known as the old sin nature thoughts giving birth to sin, the action. That's when the sin really comes forth. Bitterness coming to the surface. You see it in James 1:13 through 15, Hebrews 12:15. You guys know some of these pretty well. James chapter 1, verses 13 through 15 speaks to the fact that God does not tempt us with evil, but it is the lustful thoughts like bitterness or jealousy, perversion, whatever it is that dwell, that gives birth to the sin, because the sin's the action when it comes forward. When those thoughts start to swell around, it's not sin yet. It's just that little whisper of the old sin nature, whisper of that fallen angel in your ear saying, yeah, go ahead, be angry. Go ahead, be jealous. It's what you do with it. Hebrews 12:15, see to it. We know this one, right? No one comes short of the grace of God. That no root of bitterness springing up causes what? Trouble. and by it many are defiled. That's exactly what we're seeing. It's always interesting that one bitter or negative person can bring out the negativity or bitterness in others with just a few minor suggestions, just a few minor words, and that birds of a feather start to flock together, as they say. But you think about it. I look at the political climate in the last 9 months, 10 months. Riots start with 1 or 2 shouts, right? Rebellion, acts of civil disobedience start 1 or 2 people. You send maybe a handful of people in that are paid to go and protest, because we find that out as time goes on. And they start, and they get everybody riled up. And then they can take off because everybody's burning and destroying and killing everybody then. Whole city blocks are torn down because of 1 or 2 bitter or jealous people, sparking the bitterness. The arrogance within their soul surrounds everybody, and it just kind of goes out, roots itself in everybody. Genesis 37:19, they said to one another, here comes the dreamer. In verse 20, now then, come and let us, this is their brother. This is their brother. Come and let us kill him. Not only kill him, but we'll deal away with the body. We'll throw it in a pit. Wow. And we will say, a wild beast devoured him, then let us see what will become of his dreams. Look how angry they are over the dreams. Kill him and throw him in a pit. He's special. I'll show him how special he is. Right? Why does he have to have this? Why do they got to have money? Why do they got to have this? Why did they get a promotion? Why did this happen? Turn to Hebrews chapter 12. We're going to close it there. Let's close this out with a look at why we should never become bitter or have jealous spirit within our soul. There's basically no excuse for living in our flesh or having a bitter spirit. You basically got to do what we're always told to do from here, is get your mind off yourself. Get your mind on Jesus Christ, what he did. Joseph and his brothers were all struggling with a focus issue. They were struggling with a focus issue. Joseph was focused on, I'm the special one. Look what I got. Look what I'm giving. His brothers were focused on the fact that he was the special one, and it was aggravating them. Focus on self, it's a problem. Focusing on the flesh or the failure of others, it's a problem. We're not supposed to know anybody after the flesh. We all go through testing, right? We all suffer at times. We all face adversity. And we're all disciplined from time to time. That's just how it works. Hebrews 12:3. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Ask yourself something. You think you've ever gone through what Jesus Christ went through? The level of betrayal? Maybe you have. I don't know. I know from studying the Bible that I don't think anybody's gone through anything that Jesus Christ has gone through. Keep that in mind. Consider him who endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in striving against sin. Hebrews 12:5, and you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord what? Loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. That's actually from Proverbs 3:12 as well. Hebrews 12:7, it is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? Verse 8, but if you are without discipline, that's scary, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. I'd rather be a son with a cherry red butt than not a cherry red butt and not be a son. Furthermore, in verse 9, we had earthly fathers to discipline us, and we respected them. Shall we not much rather be subjected to the Father of spirits and live? In verse 10, for they disciplined us for a short time as seemed best to them. Many of them failed. They just were human. But he disciplines us for our good, so that we may share his holiness. Hebrews 12:11. All discipline for the moment seems to be what? Not joyful. Nobody likes a good spanking, right? Well, I shouldn't say that. I have some folks that might like it. But sorrowful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, yet to those who have been trained by it, yet to those who have been trained by it. Think about that. Afterwards, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. But I was looking at this, yet to those who have been trained by it. In other words, discipline sometimes falls on somebody who's so stubborn. And I was talking, I think, to Robert and a couple folks, Jason, we were talking. And I always say, Pharaoh, when you think about a hard heart, and we're doing a study on Moses and everything, the dispensational law, and we're getting into all these dispensations, and it's a great series. But Pharaoh could have been a hero. At some point or another, he could have just turned and said, whoa, I'm into the second or third plague here. Wait a minute, your God's the real deal. I'm bound. I'm going to give you all the gold. What do you need? Camels, cattle? I love your Lord. I'm going to take care of you guys. I'm going to carry you across the desert. He could have been viewed as a hero. All discipline for the moment seems to be not joyful but sorrowful, yet to those who have been trained by that discipline, afterwards it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. For a lot of folks, it doesn't yield anything. It yields another curse on me, another problem, another stumbling block. And I know from my own experience that this French-Irish head has run to a lot of brick walls, dusted off, figured out, okay, I got a bump on this side, and ran and hit this side. Dusted off, waited a few days, the bumps went down, ran back and did it again. I'm done. I'm done. I'm still going to fail, but boy, I'm not. So I give up quick now. Like, Father, what do you want me to do? You show me. I don't want it. I don't want to, I don't want to strive. I don't want to manipulate. I don't want to run and crash into nothing. I want you to just take me like a little child and you guide me. You open the door when you're ready. If not, I'm going to sit here and shut my mouth. And it's been a lot easier the last few years that I've done that. So those who have been trained by it, that kind of stuck with me. Afterwards, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. The Lord doesn't have anything horrible in line for you. You do it to yourself. You do it to yourself. I do it to myself most of the time. Psalms 119:75, I know, O Lord, your judgments are righteous, and that in faithfulness you have what? Afflicted me. Doesn't sound too pleasant. There's a couple of aches and pains I got from some stupidity in my life, and I think I'm the better man for it because I learned some lessons. And God knew in eternity past that I was going to run in that direction. He kind of wanted me over here, but he let me, being the perfect gentleman that I am, go over in that direction. A couple of times he gave me a cherry red bottom. A couple of times I gave myself lumps on the head. But eventually I ended up over here. Eventually. Joseph struggled with arrogance and feeling entitled. His brothers were what we call petty or bitter. Pettiness is just making something out of nothing and blowing it up. His brothers just could have looked at him like, he's a little braggadocious or whatever. And they also could have looked at him like, maybe he is special, these dreams, maybe something. They could have been a little more kind. But they were petty, jealous, and bitter. God had to use testing and discipline on all of them at different levels, at all different points, from all different angles to push them to some form of spiritual growth. And the sad part is, I think his brothers were probably still struggling with spiritual self-esteem years later when they came to Egypt. They were still spiritual babes. Basically, testing and discipline, trials, difficulties, they're the training grounds for spiritual maturity, and it's during these field tests, that's a military term, that we flex our faith muscles. You test things out in the field before you go to battle. Proverbs 3:11 and 12, my son, do not reject the discipline of the Lord or loathe his reproof, for whom the Lord loves, he reproves, even as a father corrects the son whom he delights. Thank you, Royal Family. Father, I ask that we go here, and those folks that we prayed about in the beginning, I ask you to touch their lives, and everybody go forth, be able to take this message and do something with it, metabolize it, take it out to a lost and dying world. Through Jesus' name, amen.